Imagine the greatest military triumph of a nation turning into humiliation within seconds. That is exactly what happened in September of 2025, when the Chinese aircraft carrier Fujian set out for its first trials. Out of nowhere, the nuclear submarine USS Ohio surfaced right beside it without ever being detected. No shots, no missiles, just a silent demonstration of American superiority. A direct message not only to China, but also to Moscow and Pyongyang. The appearance was a shock, but it also revealed something far more concerning. The world is facing the consolidation of a new axis of power, an alliance formed by three regimes that openly challenge the global order: China, Russia, and North Korea. United by different, yet complementary interests, they now form a front that threatens to turn the Pacific into a stage for direct confrontation. At the center of this axis stands Xi Jinping's China. Not satisfied with being only the economic powerhouse known as the world's factory, Beijing is pouring billions into modernizing its navy and air force. The aircraft carrier Fujian, the crown jewel of Chinese naval engineering, symbolizes this ambition: to project global power and prove that the country no longer intends to limit itself to the role of a regional force. Alongside technology comes the pursuit of political and military influence over its neighbors and over the strategic trade routes that sustain global commerce. Vladimir Putin's Russia has chosen a different path. With an army scarred by defeats in Ukraine and an economy suffocated by sanctions, Moscow falls back on what it still has most feared: brute force. The world's second-largest nuclear arsenal remains its ultimate card of intimidation, while military parades and missile tests serve to reinforce the image of a power determined to keep alive the legacy of a lost empire. Meanwhile, in the Far East, Kim Jong-un's North Korea plays the role of the unpredictable piece, always ready to use nuclear blackmail as a diplomatic tool. With ballistic missile launches over the Sea of Japan and military parades flaunting warheads like trophies, Pyongyang keeps its neighbors on constant alert, while providing Moscow and Beijing with a useful distraction. For Kim, it is a chance to guarantee his political survival. For China and Russia, an ally willing to raise tensions whenever convenient. The result of this union is a bloc that is not limited to displaying power, but one that seeks to rewrite the rules of the game. While the West grounds its strength in treaties and alliances such as NATO, this axis bets on chaos. Moscow uses its battlefields as a showcase for heavy artillery. Beijing turns its parades into demonstrations of technological might, and Pyongyang makes its nuclear tests into intimidation spectacles. The message is clear: if the world does not accept their terms, they are ready to impose them by force. This escalation creates a new strategic reality, where vital trade routes across the Pacific may turn into high-risk zones and borders become contested week after week. And it was against this very scenario that the United States chose to send its silent message. A message that came from the depths of the ocean. The Chinese pride CNS Fujian, the country's third aircraft carrier and the first fully designed and built on Chinese soil, was leaving the shipyard for its initial trials. Displacing more than 80,000 tons, equipped with electromagnetic catapults and prepared to operate fifth-generation J-35 fighters, the vessel symbolized China's definitive entry into the exclusive club of naval superpowers. For Beijing, the Fujian was proof that the nation was ready to rival the United States at sea. Satellite images showed the giant surrounded by Type 052 Delta destroyers and Type 054 Alpha frigates, forming a protective screen meant to inspire confidence. But while the spotlight was fixed on this grand spectacle, another protagonist was quietly approaching from the depths. The USS Ohio, a nuclear-powered submarine converted for strategic operations, carried with it a kind of power rarely concentrated in a single platform. Originally designed for ballistic missiles, it was modernized to carry up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, capable of striking targets more than 1,600 kilometers away with surgical precision. In practice, this means the Ohio alone has the power to devastate an entire fleet or wipe out a country's military infrastructure within hours. Its lethality goes beyond weaponry. A hull coated with acoustic absorbing materials, a nuclear reactor engineered to run in near absolute silence, and advanced electronics make it practically invisible to enemy sonar. Then, the impossible happened. During the Fujian's drills, on what seemed to be a routine morning, the sea's surface was broken by the black silhouette of the USS Ohio. It surfaced at close range to the aircraft carrier, right within the line of sight of the Chinese sailors. No radar, no sonar, no aerial patrol had detected its presence until that moment. The shock within China's naval command was immediate. Officers who just minutes earlier were celebrating the Navy's greatest triumph now stared at a nightmare. The carrier that symbolized their rise stood vulnerable, exposed before a submarine that could, if it chose, sink it in a matter of minutes. Emergency reports flew between escort ships. Frantic search orders were issued, but it was already too late. The Ohio had made America's point without firing a single missile. China, even with its modern fleet, remains dramatically vulnerable in anti-submarine warfare. The incident was more than just a show of strength. It was a carefully staged humiliation. Beijing sought to display power, but ended up revealing weakness. And for Moscow and Pyongyang, watching from afar, the message was unmistakable. If even China's most advanced carrier could be caught off guard this way, none of their own forces would be safe against the submarine supremacy of the United States. The scene of the USS Ohio surfacing next to the Fujian was not an isolated act. It was part of a new American strategy that has been quietly referred to as the Ghosts of the Pacific War. Instead of competing head-on with China in the number of ships, fighters, or missiles, the United States has adopted a doctrine of asymmetric containment, striking at the enemy's weak points with invisible platforms, technologically superior and able to appear and vanish without warning. The size of the Chinese fleet does not matter if, at any moment, a stealth submarine can emerge in the middle of it, or a swarm of drones can shut down its electronic systems. The message is clear. Washington does not need to mirror Beijing's strength, it only needs to exploit its gaps. This doctrine takes shape through a true ring of fortresses across the Pacific. The US has been reinforcing its allies' defenses with weapons that shift the regional balance. In Japan, next-generation air defense systems and F-35 fighters guarantee superiority against any incursion. In South Korea, the integration of radars, missile defense batteries, and new joint exercises with American forces expand the ability to intercept even hypersonic threats. In the Philippines, Washington signed agreements that reopened and expanded strategic bases, positioning forces just a few miles from vital Chinese routes. Farther south, Australia became a key piece with the AUKUS Pact, transferring nuclear submarine technology to the Australian Navy. These vessels, silent and lethal, will allow Canberra to control crucial maritime corridors without depending entirely on the US. And at the heart of the Pacific, the historic Pearl Harbor base underwent a modernization that turned it into a logistical and military hub capable of sustaining extended operations anywhere in the region. Each move is not just military, but also political. It proves to allies that Washington will not back down, while forcing Beijing to face a nearly unsolvable puzzle. This web of alliances and bases creates a scenario that forces China to defend itself on multiple fronts. Geographically, Beijing must spread its navy across the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, the Sea of Japan, and even the Indian Ocean. Technologically, it is compelled to pour trillions into trying to catch up with American capabilities that are still years ahead. And economically, every dollar spent on weapons is one less dollar to maintain the internal stability of a country already strained by slowdown and debt. The Ghosts of the Pacific are not only submarines or stealth aircraft, they are also bases, alliances, and technologies that erode China's advances without a single shot being fired. The Ohio incident showed the most symbolic face of this strategy. The US does not need to destroy the Fujian to make its point. It only needs to appear at the right time, in the right place, and then disappear again, leaving behind a sense of vulnerability that no military parade can erase. In the end, as impressive as aircraft carriers, fifth-generation fighters, or invisible submarines may be, there is still one card that remains the true checkmate of American strategy: nuclear superiority. The United States maintains the largest and most advanced arsenal on the planet, backed by a triad that combines strategic bombers, submarines, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. In recent months, tests of the Minuteman III and the Trident II D5 were conducted in front of cameras, not only to validate their effectiveness, but also as a direct message to Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang. The message is simple and unequivocal. No matter how much they advance in ships, tanks, or missiles, none of these nations can match America's ability to respond with total destruction in the event of nuclear war. It is this ever-present shadow that keeps the game contained, even when incidents like the Fujian seem to push the world to the brink. Global competition in the 21st century is no longer defined solely by the number of soldiers or the grandeur of massive warships. Today, war also unfolds in the invisible realm of technology, intelligence, and psychology. Submarines that appear without warning, drones that operate like swarms, and artificial intelligence systems that anticipate enemy moves are worth as much as an entire fleet. What is at stake is not just territory, but the ability to shape the perception of allies, rivals, and public opinion itself. In this sense, China's humiliation at the hands of the USS Ohio was more than a military operation. It was a calculated psychological strike designed to erode the confidence of a rising rival. And this is precisely where the great question about the future arises. Will this bold move by the United States reduce tensions in the Pacific by imposing respect? Or will it simply accelerate the arms race and drive the region into a new Cold War? And how will China respond to such a brutal exposure of its vulnerability? If you want to keep following how this global chessboard is changing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next developments. Also, make sure to watch right now the video Still Believe in Russia's Power. Watch this and think again. In it, you will see how, 3 years after the invasion, Russia is not winning, but sinking into a strategic disaster of its own making, with catastrophic human losses, a collapsing economy, and a regime that believed far too much in its own propaganda.